So let me call this public forum to order. I'm Dana Hall. I have the pleasure of serving as the current president of ALA. Tonight, we had, at our most recent board meeting, we had agreed that we would kind of wrap up, do a year-end wrap-up by talking about several of our projects, 5 or 6 of our efforts across this year, most of which will extend into next year, and take about 10 minutes each. So with questions either during or after, as the speaker may want. And so by 8 o'clock or so, we'll wrap things up and bid everyone adieu. But before we plunge forward, in addition to welcoming everybody, let me ask that we participate in a toast. And that's to the outgoing 2020. Personally, I'll be happy to see it gone. And welcoming the new year. Thanks, Jim, also especially for all the great work you did in selling our property. That was a wonderful task, wonderful job to do. And thanks to everybody else on the board of directors for working so hard and volunteering your hours. And so here's to you all, and
cheers, everyone.
Happy holidays.
Cheers.
Happy holidays.
okay. So let's see, Kelly O'Hara, I see you, but you're muted down there. So how are you doing?
Great, Dana. Good to be here tonight with all of you and hear about your great work you're doing.
Great, wonderful. And Peter Kaplan, you're muted. How are you? Well, let me get underway. So, as I said a moment ago, our informal, not very flexible, I guess is the right word, plan of attack is 5 or 6 topics summarizing what we've been doing in the watershed and for the lake this year and continuing into next year. And our leadoff presentation is Rick Nelson, long-term board member. And Rick, I'll let you talk about our support for remediating roadside ditches.
Before Rick starts, I'm going to run the PowerPoint for everybody. So just holler at me for next slide when you need it. And I'm going to share my screen now.
Next slide.
Drum roll before you start, Rick?
No, thank you, Jim.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's the beginning slide. I'm the first one up, and to talk about
There we go.
ditch remediation, roadside ditch control. The whole point of what we're trying to do in this part of our efforts is to reduce erosion, obviously, thereby reducing sediment and nutrients getting into the lakes. As many of you know, Dr. Rebecca Schneider from Cornell estimates 22% of all goes into the lake comes from roadside ditches, good and bad. Next slide, please. So this is more of a wrap up what we've been doing the last 5 years. Once we started doing fire lane ditches and county, not county, but town and county roadside ditches. So we had the good fortune in 2016 to receive $20,000 from Toyota, Fox Toyota 10,000 and from Toyota National 10,000 with no restrictions as to how we did it other than to help the lake and the watershed. So with working with Drew Snell, the OWIPD, Owasco Lake Watershed Inspection Protection Division Chief Inspector, he identified several projects that we could do initially with some of that money back in starting in mid 2016 through the end of 2018. These were 50% funded, cost matched by the property owners through Drew, and with the property owners hiring a private contractor, we did rock improvements, stabilization along about 600 feet of 2 different projects on Fire Lane 23E, and then about 150 feet on Fire Lane 11E, Denman Cove, North Denman Cove Road, and then down by Peter's neighbor Scott Hughes, Fire Lane 11W around that culvert. I'll have pictures shortly after I go over this, and we can talk, show you just what's been done. Then in 2019, we had some money left over from the Toyota Let me back up first. We weren't able to spend all the money from Toyota because we found a lot of projects, but there's difficulty in getting homeowners, property owners to agree to the project and or to cost share at all. These were all 50% cost share requirement by us, just so our meager money went as far as it did. We spent about $12,000 on those 4 projects of our money. And so that was worth $24,000 worth of roadside ditches, which added up to about 950 feet of fire lane ditch stabilization and erosion control. And in 2019, we started the ditch remediation project or program, and we had about $5,000 left from the Toyota fund. We started requesting donations from private individuals and from foundations locally to work in conjunction with the Cayuga County Soil and Water Conservation District. And we have that MOE now that we started in 2019, it'll go through 2021, where we 25% cost share. They have grant money where they can pay for projects, hydroseeding, rock stabilization, with 75%, but they need to have some other funding source, non-state, non-governmental, private, like us, to make these projects happen. And we had the money with our $45,000. So we 25% cost share on several projects starting in late 2019 and through all of most of the first half of 2020. We're still wrapping that up, and that covered many watershed roads and then a big long section of it along a ditch in Fire Lane 20E. So again, I want to emphasize there was this collaboration between the excellent work that Drew Snell, the chief inspector, in identifying these sites, and in an earlier project where he did a survey of a lot of roadside ditches in the watershed, finding out the worst ones. And those are between those that he found are now being, several of those have been identified, have been worked on by the Water Conservation District. I'm going to just call them a district to be short. And so there's been a lot of great work between us, Drew Snell, the chief watershed inspector, and through the district folks. So let's go next slide, please. We'll start with the pictures. This is the first one we did. There's 2 long sections of Fire Lane 23E. This slope obviously goes uphill, and did this at 2 different projects privately. That was about $11,000 plus project between the 2, and we paid our half of that roughly. And next slide. This is Denman Cove, Fire Lane 2011E. This lady, Teresa Zanowick, this ditch, roadside ditch, there's the Fire Lane 11E, the North Road. Below the picture, it runs into a culvert that's in front of her house. And so in a high flow situation, it was not conducive to the water running around her house or into her house. So she reached out with Drew Snell. We had a private contractor put in that section, about 150 feet of rock stabilization there. I don't have pictures for the Fire Lane 11W, but that was another big project. That same contractor, same private contractor, Drew Snell, and they stabilized the culvert down at the bottom of Fire Lane 11, and it was eroding on the inflow. They stabilized with a bunch of big blocks, and then it had a big deep outflow pool that they put a lot of rock in to stabilize to minimize erosion at the outflow of that culvert. So next one, please. Oh, I'll back up on that. Fire Lane, if you would, please. Fire Lane 20E was the one that was done where we cost shared with the district. There's the first project recently that we've done with the district. And you can see the homeowners on the left and the right. This was about a $11,500 project. And with we were agreeing to spend about $3,000 or $4,000 to fix this ditch, because you can see the lake's pretty close there. And with Drew's efforts, the homeowners on each side contributed $1,000. So of the 25% that we were going to pay, we only ended up paying $889 so our money went pretty far with that. And the district did all this work, and they covered 75% of the cost. So another long section of 500 or 600 feet of non-eroding ditch now. More erosion control. Next slide, please. Okay, that's the next slide. This is Tucker. Now, these are projects were done this spring. This is Tucker Hill Road in Locke. This is the before. See the after. And you can see it goes up there and around the bend. It's a long stretch, 550 feet. It was a project that cost $12,000. Ala's portion was $3,100 down in Locke. Next section, please. Next picture. This is one of several Wyckoff Road projects. This happened to be in Locke, and that's obviously before, not a good erosion, but these, the district came along and they put some heavy rock and light rock, and they also put an underlayment before they put the rock down, so it doesn't settle as much and things don't grow. It's there for a long time to prevent erosion. And the total, we have another picture. I think the next one might be another Wyckoff Road. Here's a different spot, other side of the road, I think maybe, but and then before, and here's the after. And this goes down it below the picture is a big deep ravine, and they stabilized both sides of this ditch going into the ravine to a total of 1,400 feet. And that project was about $30,000 total cost, and Al contributed $7,500 roughly. And that is in, well, they said that's in Locke. So. Okay, next picture, please. There's another Wyckoff Road with more than 1,400 feet next to stabilized. So it's a big difference.
Rick, isn't Wyckoff Road in Scipio?
Yeah, I'm not sure why that's how he has it listed that way, because it starts in like South Fleming and goes south. These are more or less in Scipio. Now that I look at it, there are 3 or 4 sites going south along Wyckoff Road. But
I can't confirm or deny that was my fault with road name or the town names.
Okay, well,
I don't know.
it all drains into the lake, you know. So next slide, please. This is Mathers Road. It's a big, long, steep road that empties out on Route 38 at about Cascade. And this is the upper portion before it, near the top of the hill there. And this is before, and you can see the bank on the left side. Here's they carved back the bank, hydroseeded it, filled in with a lot of rock. And the next picture, I think, shows the lower section, probably before, as it drains into obviously the big ditch and culvert by its truck. And here's the after with how much they hydroseeded there and all that rock. And that project was, the Mathers Road was $25,000, and we paid $6,200 to make this happen. 360 feet, but obviously a lot of work there, a lot of deep. So it's just amazing the amount of work they've been able to do in the district and how we cost share with that in these projects. Next slide, please, if there is any. Anyway, that I wanted to read last thing before I'm done. There is talking with I find my notes here. I work with Tim Schneider at the district primarily, and just for part of what we've been able to do this year and last, probably over 20 miles of hydroseeding. If you have any questions what that is, each load of hydroseed does about a quarter mile a ditch average. We've done over 20 miles in the last couple of years, and we've done over almost a half mile or more of rock stabilization, and or more like 3/4 of a mile. And there's more to be done. They did most of this in the spring, and there's going to be some now. He hopes to get some projects done this month and next, and into 21 we have some money. Our agreement and their grant money both still have funding to go into next year. I just want to read lastly where they hydroseeded. It's Hilliard Road, Mathers Road, Wyckoff Road, Quarry Road, Split Rock Road, Rowe Road, Harder Road, Galwillow Road, Vanderstow Road, and Ensign Road, to name a few. So, any questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Rick.
I have a question, Rick.
Sure.
This is Julie. I serve on the board. I was talking with Dana this morning and with Adam Effler, who's the executive director for the Owasco Lake Watershed Management Council. which is an interagency, intermunicipal group that oversees caring for the watershed. We were wondering about, is there any kind of record keeping with all this work, so that we know when, where, how much? Is there any kind of schedule for these things being redone? I'm just wondering what the lifespan will be for some of these things, or if they're going to be recording that so they can tell, because that could be really useful to know in the future.
I don't, I mean, I obviously I have the records of what we've done with these, but as far as down the road where they need to be re-accomplished, I have not had that conversation with Tim. There are so many that have to be done still, you know, that let's get those fixed. And these, the worst I've seen is maybe like that Denman Cove, and that didn't have a liner where they weeds and grass starts growing in the rock, but at least the rock is still there, you know. So I think it's a long period before they need to be, unless they get a washout for some reason, which I've not witnessed. Even that one from Firelink 23E, they've not had any washouts, and we put little check dams in there. So, but I'll ask Tim if there is some sort of a schedule, or Drew, but I don't know of one right now. They are going to, one last answer, part of what Tim Snyder's going to do this fall is those sediment traps, those open concrete bathtubs, and they're going to put those in some streams this now, if they can get to it, or early in the year. And those do require some periodic, you know, sediment removal from those concrete bathtubs by whatever municipality owns that road. So that's hopefully that happens. But that's the only one I know of, any kind of recurring maintenance. Thank you. That's a good question.
Okay, again, Rick, thank you for that summary. This is Dana Hall, and I'm next up on the plate. Hemlocks are a type of conifer evergreen, as I hope everyone knows, and very common, used to be particularly common throughout our region. Most of the hemlocks over the decades and generations have been cut, not so much for their wood, but instead for their bark, because the bark produces tannin, which may sound familiar, and it's used in tanning leather. But hemlocks are under siege by yet another nasty Asian bug. And I just wanted to tell you about the effort we AULA have cranked up to, as this slide says, take a look at where we have remaining hemlocks and their respective health. So if I could have the next slide. And on that first slide, you don't need to go back, but on this first slide, this is all in concert with a large activity trying to save the hemlocks down in Ithaca at Cornell University, the Cornell Hemlock Initiative. And I'll tell you more about that in following slides. So go ahead, Dave. So this nasty pest over anywhere from 2 to 10 years kills hemlocks. And this chart shows you the progression of a hemlock on the lake frontage, or several anyway, of transitioning from health to a sickly status, and then finally to a loss, a dead status. David, next slide. So what are these pests? They are called HWA, which stands for Hemlock Woolly Adelgid. And they're tiny little things. You're looking here at the bottom side of a small branch of a hemlock tree. You can see those white puffy balls. That's what they look like at this time of year. They have that cottony cluster pulled around them. And when they become active again in the spring and through the summer, they feed where each of those needles attaches to its twig. So that's a picture of what they look like right now. David, next slide. And come March, April, they're emerging from that fluffy cluster, and you can see their black outline, but look at their relative size compared to the needles of a hemlock. So my point being, they're very tiny, but they also are very deadly to the hemlocks. So hemlocks are critically important to all of us. It's a tree that's native to both the East Coast and the West Coast, but left to their own devices, they tend to grow in dense stands, dense clusters. The roots interlock, and of course, that helps then prevent erosion. And that's particularly important in our watershed, in the ravines and the gorges that cut down through the watershed, draining down to the lake. Those ravines and gorges are also where most of our remaining clusters of hemlocks are located, because they're hard to get out of once they were cut. So the hemlocks are down in these ravines and gorges, or at least some of them. They shade the streams for fish, keep the water cooler, provide food and cover for wildlife. But our main interest is they help prevent erosion when they're healthy. But here on the East Coast, these eastern hemlocks have no natural predators. Hemlocks also grow out on the West Coast in Oregon and Washington. There are insect predators that Cornell is trying to introduce back here, so that we hopefully in 8 or 10 years we'll have yet another balanced ecology. Dave, next slide, please. So Cornell prepared this map, and you don't need to particularly see it in detail, but as you know, the deeper ravines and gorges are on the southern half of the lake and down along the flats, Owasco Flats. And if you can just decipher the coloration, the ones that are colored red have the greatest likelihood, according to Cornell, their experience in using Google Earth and so forth, are the ones that have the highest likelihood of having remaining clusters of hemlocks. Dave? So we've pulled together a group, given ourselves a name called the Owasco Hemlock Hunters. We are affiliated officially with the Cornell Hemlock Hunters, their hemlock initiative. And so we have an expert from Cornell, Drew Snell, the watershed inspector. The New York State foresters also work with us on this. Some of you maybe know Walt Aitman, particularly from the town of Owasco. Adam Effler, the head of the Management Council. A number of the members of this Hemlock Hunters group are Aula people, no surprise, and then several others are volunteers. So a total of about 12 constitute our membership. David? So our objective, the objective of forming this Hemlock Hunter group and getting us trained and so forth is, right now, we don't know how many hemlocks remain in our ravines and gorges. There's no census, no inventory. So our purpose is to get at least an indicative count of those trees, and then also assess their health, because this hemlock woolly adelgid has been chomping away and doing this damage for the last 12 or 15 years. And we as Johnny-come-latelys are finally figuring out that they're doing very bad damage. We're going to focus on the ravines and gorges. We kick into gear after hunting season. So during the height of winter, from January 1st until late March, is when these hemlock hunters, myself included, will be out counting and surveying hemlock health. Almost all of these ravines are on private property, so we won't go on any property unless we have the owner's permission. And of course, we have to be very mindful of COVID and the weather and physical safety. So subject to all those constraints, we hope to visit many of those gorges and ravines that were colored red on that prior slide. And then you might be asking yourself, well, okay, so they find trees that are ill and maybe not too far gone. What happens then? Well, we need to raise money, but targeted application of chemicals will stop or delay these insects. And our strategy is if we can delay them long enough for the Cornell natural predators, insect predators to take hold in the region, maybe we can save at least a worthwhile fraction of our hemlocks and thus prevent further erosion into the lake. So that's what's going on with our hemlocks and Aula's role in that. Any questions, anybody? If not, then thank you very much. And Linda, I think you're on base now, and you've been very capably leading our membership campaign and keeping track of our members. But the importance of this, as I think you'll point out, Linda, is the more members we have, the stronger our voice is to the politicians, especially. So Linda, over to you.
Membership, while it might not sound terribly exciting, it's basically our foundation, because that's what we are. We're a group of members. We're a group of volunteers who have created this very strong bond with one another that are working to save our lake. And we have been, Dave, you can go to the next one. We have been in a membership transition. For the last over a year, we're moving into a more modern database membership system. And it's had its challenges. We cannot deny that, but we are definitely streamlining the process. We're making a lot of progress, learning more all the time, and feeling very comfortable with that. What you see in front of you are the various membership levels that we do have to join as student, single, family, sentinel, guardian, and defender and champion. Okay, Dave? Now, we cannot stress enough the importance of membership. Obviously, since we are a group of volunteers, we need people to work on our various committees. But in addition to that, I really need to stress to people that even if you're in a position where you cannot, for whatever reason, join on any committee, becoming a member itself is becoming part of the solution. And that's what we need. We need people to become part of the solution. And what it does is, by having community support, when we go to foundations, when we write grants, when we go out there to ask for money to do exactly what the gentlemen before me have talked about, we have to show community support, because it's that support that will really, in many ways, guarantee that we will get this assistance from foundation and grants. Also, as Dana pointed out initially, we want to have a voice that's heard. And I've always been very impressed at the voice that we've had. And this voice is the voice that we want to put out to get political impact that we do need for change. We do have some goals. We're looking to increase our membership basically, and also to create a membership of larger groups. We're looking at maybe towns such as Scipio that recently joined us at the champion level. We're looking at maybe businesses and maybe corporations that will become members. And then from there, the individual people in those groups can take out individual memberships. We also would like to start in 2021, increasing our membership throughout our 208 square mile watershed. We've had a lot of impact around Owasco, around the Auburn area, Moravia, because we're really close to the lake, but we want to stretch south from there, Groton and Locke, and go south to look for increased membership. I've gone on and done presentations to groups in 2019, which because of COVID had to stop in 2020, but that can start up again once we get through this difficult period. One of the things we're doing too is we're trying to be more solicitous of renewals. One of the things I found out in talking to people, I've been making some phone calls, is that many people say, well, I am a member, I joined, but it's like, oh, well, you joined for a year. And so we have that kind of disconnect there that you're going to find with people when you reach out and say, are you going to join AWLA? They'll say, well, we are members of AWLA. Well, that in itself has been an interesting situation. So as our board reaches out to friends and families and neighbors to ask them to join, they'll notice that people think once, it's an annual membership. Okay, and then of course the next one, please. This is how they join AWLA. This is on our website. This is also on information that I send out to anybody. I always add this, that you can join online. We really encourage people to do this. We'd like people to be doing this online. But also I've sent out 2 or 3 of them this week, membership forms to people who aren't comfortable doing things online, and they can join and they can just send a check-in. They can also call us or whatever to ask for membership. So that's where we're at. I think that we're mighty powerful for the number of people we have, and I think that it's going to really grow and just exponentially get larger. And I think it's very important that we've gotten our database, things are working better with the online. So thank you.
Any questions for Linda, everybody?
Dana, I want to say that Linda and Gilda and Dave and Julie, they all are doing a tremendous job with the membership.
Oh,
So
you appreciate that. Thank you. With your help, Sue, with your help.
So thank you, Linda. Hey, Julie, you want to talk to us about our efforts to, seems simple, but it's an important job to just keep the lake shore cleaned up?
This is my 1 slide presentation, so I'm the short stuff tonight. So my husband Scott and I walk a certain part of the shoreline daily, pretty much daily, and it's amazing what washes up or falls out of the back of people's trucks or gets thrown out of windows along the way. And over the years, we've just pick up things as we go along, but we wanted to see something more official. And this past spring, the 2 of us and Gilda actually got together on a day, it was 37 degrees, and we started picking up garbage, and it was amazing how quickly we warmed up. I was peeling layers off myself, and I was quite comfortable. It actually was snowing at one point. I just couldn't believe it. So that was our initial attempt. We wanted to do something bigger, and the plan was to have it be open to the public, and we would have a north side and a south side and this and that. And then COVID hit, and we had to curtail our plans for safety purposes. So what it turned into was Saturday, November 7th, which was a beautiful day. It was in the 60s, I think, wasn't it? Sunny. No wind. I was actually a little uncomfortable. It was warm. About a dozen of us, we decided to keep it just to the board itself for safety reasons. And then we didn't gather. We went to our own access to the lake if we live on the lake, or we went to Emerson Park. Adam Effler joined in on this, the executive director of the management council. He and his wife were up at the park, Emerson Park. And we just spent a couple of hours picking up. It's not rocket science. You need contractor grade garbage bags so you don't jab holes and everything. You need some gloves that protect your hands from glass, and hopefully some waterproof shoes. And the nicest thing about doing this in the fall is that the lake level has been dropped purposefully. And so there you have more access to shoreline and can get into stuff. I discovered that it could also get stuck in the mucky stuff. It's not as good. This isn't a scratch and sniff photograph, because it in places the smell was not too nice. So I just said how many people, and I have the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good was it's remarkably active for exercise and get the fresh air, and except when you're holding your nose. The bad, I asked people to tell me what they found, because I'm endlessly fascinated by that. It's like a little chance to be an anthropologist or something. I think it was Ken Post who found Bed Springs where he was. We got a lot of shotgun shells. The photo is of a COVID mask. Yes, they're out there too. The ugly was Adam's prize. He found a used baby diaper. Those are the kind of things I like my pickup partner to find instead of me. So we hope to do it again. We didn't weigh what we got. We filled a couple of bags as heavily as we were comfortable trying to lug around. And then the nice thing was the Parks and Rec Department let us use their dumpster to put the garbage in. And so did the town of Owasco, actually, which was nice. So what I'm hoping is we can recreate this scene on a regular basis. And I could even see it getting into a friendly competition of, you know, which areas can get the most. And it's all a win for the lake. So that's pretty much it. Does anybody have any questions?
So Julie, are you anticipating another of these while the weather is reasonably decent, or not, or perhaps next spring, but then water levels will be higher?
Yeah, I'd like to time it maybe in the spring, but before, or late winter, before the water levels go back up. But it's going to be tricky because you don't want people to, you know, break into ice or anything. So we'll have to kind of play it by ear. In May, it was still chilly. And I don't remember how high the water was at that time. Jim Beckwith could probably tell me. So I would like to see one. I'd like to see us do this at least twice a year. So that's my hope. And I know that the shoreline needs picking up again because there have been duck hunters out there the past 2 or 3 days. And with all the blasting, I know there's going to be a lot more shotgun shells to pick up. So, oh, Mylar balloons too. I don't like those things. So everybody stop releasing helium balloons at celebratory functions because they end up wadded up and wrapped around sticks, and yeah, no good.
Thank you, Julie.
You're welcome.
And Dave, let's go to our next one. And Peter, I think you're the presenter on our efforts related to the watershed rules and regs.
Yes, thank you very much. My name is Peter Rogers. I'm an AULA board member. I'd like to talk a little bit about the watershed rules and regulations that just were finalized in October of this year. Next slide, please, Dave. One thing I always like to start with is what is the Owasco Lake watershed? And I have to admit, every time I look at this map, I am absolutely amazed that it goes all the way down to Dryden area. Just to give it some numbers, the watershed area is about 205 square miles. Our lake is 11 miles long, about a mile wide. If you compare this with Skaneateles Lake, for example, which I think is 17 miles long, about a mile wide, and their watershed area is like 57 square miles. We have a monstrous watershed area. What does that really mean? That means that any drop of water that falls in this watershed ends up in our lake. And as we've said before many different times, the about 50% of the water that comes into the lake comes in through the inlet. We have some major tributaries. And as Rick Nelson pointed out, there's some studies that say maybe up to 22% of the water that comes into the lake comes through roadside ditches in the lake. So the watershed is a monstrous area, and anybody in that watershed that has any impact on water, I don't care whether they're sprinkling their lawn or whatever they're doing, ends up in the lake. Next slide, please, Dave. The watershed rules and regulations. This is a project that started 3 years ago. The original watershed rules and regs were dated 1984 and hadn't been updated since then. And as I remember, I was on the one of the work groups, stakeholders work groups, and I think the original rules and regs were something in the range of maybe 3 pages or so. It was time to look at them and take a serious look at them, especially with all the issues that we're dealing with water quality in Owasco Lake. Next one, please, David. The current watershed rules and regulations, the ones that were just passed, It's like a 97-page document, which has everything in it from all the people that worked on this project to questions and answers that were solicited by the public. Each one of them answered, and I think there's 45 pages of questions and answers at the end of this document. So where can I find this document? The simplest way is in the bottom right-hand side, Google Cayuga County Watershed Rules. You'll end up at the Cayuga County website and you'll end up with this document. The long address for it is printed below. What we'll do when this meeting is over with, I'll make sure that all this is posted on our aula.org website. But let's just go down through the document contents. I'm not going to get into detail in them because they are extensive, but they do have a very good document as far as definitions of what all these terms mean, application inspection, general provisions, and some of the sources of issues with the water quality. Everything sewage, wastewater, sludge, septic systems, and other on-site wastewater systems, pesticide use, storage of petroleum, chloride, salts, coal, sediment generation and control, nutrient management, remedies for violations, and one of the, I think the major issues that I'm not sure everybody picked up on is variances. In other words, if you are cited that you have a problem, you'll probably be working with Drew Snell, who's the watershed inspector. Drew's objective, which he's always had this objective, is to work with a landowner to try to resolve the problem. You know, he doesn't take people to court. He just tries to work with them and come up with a good, equitable solution for what people can do to fix whatever problems they have. Next one, please, Dave. There's a number of people and organizations that have endorsed this newest edition, again, October 2020 edition of the Watershed Rules and Regulations. This is Aula's letter of endorsement, which was just done, Dana, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago at the latest. Other organizations have supported the same thing, such as the Finger Lakes Regional Watershed Alliance. And again, there's a number of other organizations that are involved in lake activities or are governmental agencies or the like. People that were involved in this whole process are literally hundreds of people. And you look at it and you say it takes 3 years to do this. Well, if you look at that website, you'll see a timeline of all the activities that took place during that 3 years. All the public meetings that were held, the steering committee meetings, literally thousands of hours of study that went into this. Next one, please, Dave. So what's the impact? Why do all these rules and regulations matter? If you look in the left-hand column, everything from health of humans, health of animals, invasive species, the economy, agriculture, tourism, sports and recreation, real estate values, cost of water purification, clean water needed for industry. All of these rules and regs and the issues that are brought up there hopefully will increase and help these different issues. Next question is, what can citizens do to help? Again, we'll post this on the website, and this is just the most recent list of people, legislators that you can contact. Any letters of support would be much appreciated to try to pass this thing. The steps are, it went from the county, Department of Health and all, signed off by the town of Owasco, city of Auburn, and it was going to be solicited to Albany on the 30th of last month. I'm not quite sure whether it made that deadline or not, but if it's not there, it's imminent. It goes to the New York State Department of Health. They will then contact New York State Ag and Markets, New York State DEC. They'll confer on these rules and regs and see whether they're approved from the New York State level. It's going to be a long process, I'm afraid, in Albany. And our fear is that it dies in Albany, like unfortunately a number of things do. But here's a way that you can help, and here's the impact that it has on you. If you go back to that outline that was there, and Dave, you don't need to do that, but if you go back to the different elements of that document, you'll see things such as pesticide use, sediment control, sewage and all. That's not only from a large municipal standpoint, it's from the individual standpoint. Those are things that individuals can do. So actually, if you dig into this document and you start looking at it, I hate to say this, if it were passed or not passed, but if these suggestions are enacted, they would all benefit the quality of the water in Owasco Lake. Questions? Next one, Dave, please. Happy holidays and thank you all. And if you have any questions, I should point out, Ken Post, who's listening in tonight, was in on the steering committee. And I think there's a good portion of the people that are on the Zoom tonight that were involved in this in one way, shape, or form. Whether they went to the public meetings, whether they're shared stakeholders in this whole process. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to try to answer. Ken, maybe you can help also if you have any other things that I didn't mention. Questions, please.
I just think that you did a wonderful job, Peter, of explaining and illuminating the process. And I thank you wholeheartedly for that.
Well, thank you. Thank you for all your work in it.
I would like to make an observation, and again, Dana, add in here any moment, but when we spoke with Adam Effler this morning, there's many ways to approach this issue of water quality in our state, and one of the ways that was being considered was trying to reclassify streams in the state. Most of the streams in our area are Class C. And I don't know of all the ins and outs of those designations, something to do with, I think, good for fishing or something, but not as drinking water. And rather than try to get the classifications all brought up to drinking water purity levels, they said, well, why don't they extend the same protections to Class C streams as they do to all the others? And that actually went through the Assembly and the Senate recently, and was passed with over 70% support in both those houses or governing bodies, and then was vetoed by the governor. This just happened. So they're wondering what's going to happen. So that's one way they were trying to think about protecting water quality. Meanwhile, this is another way, and this is for one specific little big watershed for a small lake. And it's, I don't know how recent other watershed rules and regs are. I don't know how far reaching this is compared to other watersheds. I know Skaneateles Lake has very strict rules, and in fact, a lot of what we're doing here is like theirs, I believe. But we may really want to support as best we can all this hard work while the rest of the action plays out. It's just, this is cutting edge, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. And I think a lot of people are watching. So if we can, in a positive way, support all this work through reaching our legislators and our senators and the governor's office, that would be great.
And this is Dana. Let me add on a couple of observations. AULA has been in existence for, I'll say 40 years. And the sole purpose of AULA is to protect and restore the lake to a reasonable level of health. Our opinion, backed up by water quality sampling, scientific studies, repeated relooks and crossing fingers and stuff, is that the lake has taken all that it can take. Now, not just in recent years, but over the many decades. And finally, pushing back on us saying, I can't absorb anymore. So in our opinion, there's no alternative but to tighten up what we all do around the lake, regardless of our livelihood and presence and where in the watershed and whether or not you're directly a water recreation user. We've reached a point where there really is no alternative. And I also want to point out that the new regs include opportunities for phased in implementation. It's not like, one way today and a different way tomorrow. It can be phased in your respective business and home life. And also variances can be granted. So it's a transition. We don't anticipate an immediate implementation, but we got to get on with everybody trying to save the lake, since it's central to all that happens in our region, if you stop and think about it.
Just a couple of other thoughts, if I could. We had a presentation by Rick on roadside ditches. That's really sediment control. That's a portion of this whole thing. Dana talked about hemlock woolly adelgid. Those trees and those gullies are holding the earth from flowing into the lake. So that's a sediment control project. Many of these things all tie together. Again, whether it's a home or an industry, they all make a difference.
And to follow that line of thought, picking up garbage is an end use thing. It's an acute response, which is the same thing as dumping in or treating water with carbon to clean up toxins from harmful algal blooms. So what you want to change ultimately is behavior, the cause, and that's the hard part. And you can think of it as a carrot stick situation, and this could be viewed as a stick, and we don't want that. It's the carrot is better health for everybody and a better way of life, but getting people to change is the big issue. So just the awareness is not there still. Maybe this will help.
Dana, Rick.
Yes.
One other thing that you mentioned in your writings before is that we as ALLO are going to participate in helping find funding for these changes. We don't expect each property owner necessarily have to make a go of it on their own. Like with our cost sharing that we're doing now on the ditches, we'll help find funding and be helpful with that process.
Hey, Rick, this is Dana. That's a very, very, very important point that I totally neglected to emphasize. We are committed, using our voice, to raise funds through public means and from private foundations, but to raise money to help offset at least some of the implementation costs all around the watershed. So we're not just advocating and sending in letters, but we're also intending to raise money, and we have quite a track record in doing that, I must say.
Dana,
another thing that Rick came up with is leveraging the funds that we can raise. So Rick, I know with soil and water, there were some times we put in 25% of the entire project, and they were able to leverage our donation and turn it into some fairly significant funds.
Yes.
Hey, Dana,
Dana,
I think Kelly O'Hara is still on the call. Kelly, if you remember back when we did the manure management task force, that we all got together out on the County House Road and spent quite a bit of time understanding the issues and how to best attack it. And I thought the outputs from that task force were quite revealing and very helpful. And based on what I've seen tonight, I'm wondering if a sediment reduction task force isn't a direction we should go in. A couple of the things that both Rick and Peter talked about in terms of ditches and hemlocks and that kind of thing. All that stuff is all about keeping sediment out of the lake. And I think if we could focus on sediment reduction as a master plan and then look for funding to fund pieces of a plan like that. It might be better than trying to do things in a much smaller way. So it's just a thought, Kelly. I'd like to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, Ken, I think that's a good observation. And I think part of the rules and regulations, the draft that was adopted and sent to Albany, a concern of one of the key components of that plan would be a funding mechanism, and then identifying programs that currently already exist to address those concerns. So, you know, what you guys have accomplished already with soil and water on the road ditches and those projects is a great example of what needs to be laid out in the rest of that plan that would get the implementation done and identify some of the funding. And you've, you know, talked the AULA is one of the ways or a source of that funding. And that's, you know, a key component that really is missing out of those draft regulations that were sent to Albany. And I think, you know, there might be a message that comes back from Albany that says, you know, there's a lot of great information there, a lot of great thoughts. It's well written, and it reaches across, you know, different parts of the watershed and different concerns. But there needs to be a little bit more work to make it as successful as the Skinny Atlas project and the New York City projects were.
Kelly, this is Dana, and just emphasizing or repeating what I heard you say, key part of everything and key part of this is raising funds that can be leveraged so that farmers such as yourself and many smaller farmers and other business people aren't bearing the costs all by yourself as private entrepreneurs.
Exactly. Yeah. So, you know, the way that these new regulations are written, it reaches down to any farm greater than 7 acres. And so that gets, you know, well below the threshold of what, you know, the CAFO farms have already had to comply with, and some regulations that we already comply with. Having said that, there is, you know, a lot of language in there about vegetative buffers. So it doesn't take a whole lot of math for a farmer to figure out, you know, a lot of land gets taken out of production, put into those vegetative buffers, which we agree, certainly in certain areas, certain locations can be very beneficial, but without any first, you know, a funding mechanism to cover the cost to establish those practices, but then also some recognition, some way to compensate the landowner for taking that land out of production. Again, it is for the public good. It could be less expensive to help cost share that than to put in, you know, some extensive water filtration system. I know that's what Syracuse decided when they looked at the Skinny Atlas Lake watershed. Just go out and do a couple of small projects and eliminate a need for treating all of the water.
Well said, Kelly. I can't add anything to that, but so now the hard part is for all of us to collaborate and find sources of money, be it from foundations or from state or federal government agencies.
Yeah, and I'm not here as a farmer tonight. You know, I'm a water user, and you know, our plans for expansion at Cayuga Milk Ingredients, we need clean water, and we cannot operate that business without clean water. So, you know, this is really dear to our hearts.
Dana, I think Dan had something too that he wanted to say.
Well, this was about Julie's comment. I'm wondering, Julie, do you or anyone else know the reason that the governor's office vetoed the water quality measure?
I don't know the answer to that question. I have my guess, but I haven't read about it. We just spoke about it briefly today, but I'm definitely planning to look into it. Dana, do you have anything to add to that?
I just would offer the observation, Julie, as you pointed out, that our understanding is both sides of the legislative branch had approved that reclassification by 70% or so majority. And so that ought to be enough to override the governor's veto if there's that, if they are so motivated to do so. I don't know, I don't have any indication one way or the other, but that's how this could play out also.
And the bottom line is we're all going to have to pay more time, more money to keep our water. And the thing that just keeps coming home to me is what a unique place we live in. We're part of this massive watershed that produces or contains 20% of the world's fresh water. That's amazing. And we're a very small part of that. But we see outsized effects on land use. And that doesn't mean just agricultural, it means residential as well, on our lake, because the ratio is so big. Was it like 6 to 1? Looks like or 9 to 1. It looks like a lot bigger. I'm not thinking of my numbers here, but so we can be a catalyst for a fundamental shift in how we view. It's not just there to be used. We have to take care of it, and we haven't done a good enough job.
That's right. Amen.
Another question over to you, Kelly. I think you also are a member of the Partners for a Healthy Watershed.
Yeah, definitely. Part of the reason I wanted to be on the call tonight was just to update them. We have a monthly conference call coming up Monday that we'll check in with just different efforts around the various watersheds.
So Kelly, I'd like to invite the partners to collaborate with us, and we'll collaborate with you. Let's figure out how to pay for these needed changes.
Yeah, so we do work closely with the different state agencies and the soil and water conservation districts and the NRCS people. So we try to bring existing programs and apply them to these needs that these new regulations have created. So that should be the quickest way to get things done, but it doesn't always feel like it at times.
Yep, I have to agree with that. So please, just in concluding this, Kelly, forward our request to your fellow partners that we would like to work with you to help raise funding.
Oh, I will, and we enjoy the relationship.
Any other questions or discussion, anyone, about either the proposed rules and regs? Dan, did you get an adequate answer? Yes, good, thanks. Or any of our presentations this evening?
Dana, Rick, Kelly put a chat up here. He liked the pictures, the road ditches, and he said hopefully those pictures will be used in training with other highway supervisors. And as far as I know, the district does that sort of training, provides at least annually, maybe biannually, training with the supervisors in the highway departments about that. And they work closely with particularly the towns and the county for when there's ditches are scraped, they call out the district and with our funding to do the hydro seeding. So there is that collaboration and awareness among all the highway departments.
Yeah, and I think it tries to happen semi-annually, every 6 months. Everything is less than perfect, but yes, there is that level of training and awareness building.
Just one other comment on the rules and regs, if I could, please, Dana.
Yeah,
I was talking with Eileen O'Connor, and I said, Eileen, what's next? And she said it goes to Albany. And she made the comment that the New York State Department of Health has not passed a water quality document like this in the last 15 years. So when I asked her what can we do to help, she's the one that came up with a list of senators and assemblymen and all. And I urge people strongly, if you believe in this, write them, bother them, contact them in any way, shape, or form. Or if there's somebody not on this list, as I get more information from like Adam Effler or other people of additional people or organizations that should be contacted, again, we'll add it to the Aula website, aula.org. Thank you.
Peter, Rick,
Yes.
do we know if NYSFOLA has agreed or willing or going to send an endorsement letter about our rules and regs?
To my knowledge, they've not been asked. I can do that.
Okay, I can if you, or you will. Talk to
I'll
Nancy.
be happy to. Yep.
Okay.
I think you-
For
well,
Peter.
you should- I'm sorry, Meg, go ahead.
It's a quick one. So if we're to write letters at this point, what exactly are we asking the senators to do? To approve or to just get them moved through these various departments? I mean, at what point is that at now? What specifically are we going to ask them to do?
I would say approve, but what I need to do, and let me follow up on this. I did not see the document, the final document that went to Albany, and I assume that it has a cover letter to it and is requesting just what you're asking. You know, what's the wording of what it asked for? Let me find out what that document is from Eileen or whomever's in the Department of Health or Steve Lynch or whoever is coordinating that final disposition of that document to Albany.
Because I'm thinking if we had that, and then we
Right.
kind of use some of the wording from our own letter of endorsement, we could pretty easily put together letters to send to the various senators. I just want to make sure, like me personally, that I'm saying the right thing if I send that off.
I agree, and reference the right document, whether it's, you know, document number 2873 or Cayuga County watershed rules and regulations. I'll find out what that terminology is.
Also,
Thank you.
I just wanted to say that in the past, when we've called our legislators for different reasons, and we could use the information that Peter says, but we can call them. It's less arduous. It's actually easier. They take notes down. For some reason, I've heard that a call has, so I think that maybe we should reach out to our membership with some suggestions about that. So.
If I could interject real quickly, Scott found an article about the vote, and it seems, if I'm summarizing it correctly, that a group of state lawmakers representing the southern tier, Finger Lakes, and western New York urged Cuomo to veto the legislation because they thought it would significantly hinder local governments and agencies from doing the work they already do, that they felt was one of the strongest in the nation. So they were worrying that there could be costly delays or hindrances and prevent people from reacting quickly if there was a flood or a bridge got washed out, if they had to wait for permitting at the state level. And so that's what they were concerned about. And it said that the group from our region, it said state senators Tom O'Mara, Fred Akshar, George Borrello, Pam Helming, and state assembly members Phil Palmisano, Marjorie Burns, Chris Friend, Joe Giglio, Andy Goodell, and Brian Kolb were among those that urged Cuomo to veto.
Now, if
The
you're talking about the classification.
Reclassification, yes.
We've left watershed regulations and we're
Right.
back to reclassification.
Right. I was just to add an addendum to Dan's question.
I was wondering about why they vetoed it. So, okay.
Okay,
Could one
everyone.
of our, I'm sorry, Dana,
Oh, go
could
ahead.
one of our articles that we put in the Citizen describe somewhat of this circumstance and how we could look for the public's help? I mean, I don't know what can really be written about it and what can't. I'm not very versed in that. Anybody's thoughts?
Nancy, a question to you. Was there a recent one on watershed rules and regulations? It seemed as though there was.
Maybe spring or summer. There was
Okay.
one this year. Ken Post, did you do an article for us on that? I forget. I probably could find it. But
I didn't know whether something could be revised and the point that we're looking for the public's assistance, you know, in reaching out to our public affiliates in trying to get this passed and established.
The only thing, if before we did something like that, I'd want to have the blessing from county planning so that we don't step on anybody's toes. Steve
Right.
Lynch would say yay or nay or whatever.
Right,
Yeah.
that's what I'm not very versed in, so I wasn't sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure what our role is in that. I'm not sure. I think we could find out what our role could be. I mean, our role really has always been promotion and assistance and those kinds of things. So I think we might be able to do something. We do have, Julie has written an article for December. Thank you, Julie. I'm procrastinating, but I have been looking at it. And we do need one for January 1st and January 30th-ish. So if anybody would like to write an article about maybe our support of the rules and regulations or any other kind of thing you'd like to write about that has to do with the Wasco Lake protection, let me know.
Okay, everyone, we are at 8:15 roughly. Any other questions that anyone wants to raise?
I did just want to make sure that everyone knows that we put the teaching part. We have had contact with Moravia and Auburn schools, and we are going to go ahead with working with people in the watershed to teach our youth. They're very enthusiastic, but with COVID problems, it's going to be plans that we'll work at the end of this year for the 21st, 22nd year. We'll pilot it in Moravia and in Auburn, and then make tweaks on it, and then hopefully spread out with getting presentations, field trips and stuff to work with our middle school and junior high students. So that it's not done. It's not dead in the water. It's going to happen. It's just delayed because of COVID.
Okay, thank you, Linda. All right, everyone, thank you for your attendance. Thanks for listening to us do a partial wrap up of our activities across 2020. And we'll do another of our continuing public forum meetings, efforts like this in early January.
Thank you to all of you for all you do. Thanks.
Thank you.
I want to give a big hurrah to Dana for all the hard work you've been doing. It has been noticed.
Well,
Thank you, Dana.
Thank you,
And-
Joy.